Welcome to Track D, the AI and Machine Learning Summit. This is a session with Michelle talking to don't forget MLOps when deploying AI and machine learning models. Michelle's been working she's the director of data science for RS21 and has been working with AI for 15 years, working in a number of very interesting areas, including bioinformatics, doing data science consulting work. She's based in Denver, Colorado. We will have an opportunity after the presentation to ask questions. The presentation has been videotaped ahead of time to help with latency issues. So do ask your questions in the chat and we'll look forward to going forward. So thanks everybody. On to the next presentation.
So I want to thank the organizers for inviting me here. It's a real privilege to be able to come and talk to you today about MLOps. And I really want to dig into MLOps and hope to allow you to understand why it's so important to have MLOps in place whenever you're deploying AI or machine learning models. So my name is Michelle Archuleta. I'm the Director of Data Science at RS21. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or read some of my Medium articles. And I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Dr. David Dooling, whose innovative models and algorithms I will be talking about today, which involved coming up with novel AI to predict when satellites would enter safe mode. So we are RS21. We are a data science company that is leveraging artificial intelligence, design, data engineering, and software development to tackle the challenging data problems that our customers are facing. We were named as Fast Company's Best Workplaces for Innovators and Inc. 500's Fastest Growing Companies. And for today's session, I will be talking about the problem that MLOps solves. I'll be giving the what, why, when, and where. I'll talk about MLOps steps and maturity. I'll then dig into our satellite use case. And then I'll talk about how you can get that buy-in from decision makers and get an MLOps incorporated into your organization. So the problem MLOps solves is really inherent for the intrinsic differences between machine learning and traditional programming. In traditional programming, you will have an input and you write that software program that's going to perform some type of computation and you'll get those final results. This is a very repeatable, robust process. However, in machine learning, it's slightly different. In machine learning, you begin with an input and a desired result. This could be your training label, and you're really optimizing and training that model to produce your desired result. And at the end of the day, that creates a program or that machine learning model. Now, the issue comes into play that the machine learning model is really dependent on that input data set. So if that model is deployed and that data set is much different than the type of data that model's seen in the wild, you're going to see model performance degradation. And the phenomena that I'm describing is known as data drift. And that's when there's change in the incoming data stream, which ultimately leads to model performance degradation. And the best example I can give of this is COVID-19. So you could think of all of the different data sets and models that suffered because they were not able to predict that the pandemic was going to happen. So this impacted almost, every industry. So any model that was trained before COVID-19 was not able to predict, the changes in the underlying data drift that occurred during, the pandemic. Another example of this is like a medical device for diagnosing COVID-19. We can think of the COVID-19 variants as an example of data drift. The other phenomena that can occur is what's known as concept drift. And concept drift means that the statistical properties of the target variable have changed over time in most likely an unforeseeable way. And we can think of this like a spam detector, where the definition of what is spam email has changed over time. With understanding of these key limitations of AI, ML, comes real responsibility for organizations to really step up and embrace ethical AI. So we must really understand these limitations, and from those limitations, roll out a machine learning, an MLOps solution that's going to know when to retrain models such that they're not suffering from performance degradation. So what is MLOps? It's the standardization and streamlining of the learning lifecycle management. It allows businesses to provide long-term value for AI ML models deployed in the wild while also reducing risk. And it really encompasses responsible AI. So once again, knowing the limitations of those models and putting together the necessary system that's required in order to address those limitations. And it requires, committed cross-disciplinary team and executive management buy-in. What ML ops is not, it's not AI ops, which refers to leveraging AI um, for solving DevOps problems. ML ops is not model ops, which is more general and incorporates all models. Instead, ML ops is really specific to the challenges of AI and ML. And it's not about individual contributors or a single division. Why is ML ops so critical? From two perspectives, model performance and the business or customer impact. Having models that are not performed optimally, is a big challenge. And I consider the analogy for model performance when deploying a AI or ML model that doesn't have ML ops. It's like trying to ride a bike with a leak in the tire. You may be able to fill up that tire, train that model, but ultimately you won't go very far. On the business side, the results can be much more dramatic and have various negative consequences. So on that side, I consider MLOps, deploying an AI ML model without MLOps to like riding a bike without brakes. It's going to hurt badly. And in fact, 90% of ML models are not deployed. Only 2% of companies using ML have successfully deployed them to production. And that's despite that over 70 billion of global investments have been made into AI in 2019. And the demand is not slowing down. Data is growing at a volume of 61% per annum in Europe. It's projected that in 2025, there will be 4 times the amount of data that we have today. And post 2012, compute has been doubling every 3.4 months. There's been a 300% increase in the volume of peer-reviewed AI papers. And 58% of large companies have reported adopting AI in at least one function or business unit. This is your standard like 5x5 risk matrix, where you have the probability of making a false classification. It can be shown here on the y-axis, which goes from rare to highly probable, and then on the x-axis we have impact, and that can be very industry specific. So we can have like ad recommendations, movie recommendations, which might have a lower impact compared to things like financial data, autonomous driving cars, medical devices, and national security. Now, when we're training models, what we're doing is we're driving down the probability of that negative, the false prediction. However, that's all we're going to do. If we deploy that model, it'll look fine. We've optimized that model for training and test data, but once it's deployed in the wild, we're going to suffer model performance degradations. However, if we deploy model training and a full robust MLOps solution, we're able to drive down the possibilities of having false predictions. So where is MLOps being used? It's being used across many different industries, from Blue Cross Blue Shield, Deloitte, Humana, Kroger, Panasonic. So many different industries are really embracing and really understand the need for MLOps. And regulations are also driving MLOps. So in healthcare, the Food and Drug Association has established the good clinical practice regulations and guidelines around traceability, the ability to recreate the development history of a drug or medical device, accountability, data integrity. And the FDA has put forth new guidelines and action plans in January 2021 around artificial intelligence. There's financial regulation, where the UK Prudential Regulation Authority defines model risk and management principles, such as defining and recording models, establishing the right governance framework, policies and procedures and controls, and undertaking the appropriate model validation and independent review. So getting a full MLOps system is by no means trivial. It takes a lot of work and a lot of collaboration from many different divisions within an organization. And we don't all just start out experts at having a full-fledged MLOps system. Instead, it takes time. It's a gradual effort. So starting out, many things might be manual. You can incorporate DevOps or data ops, finally kind of streamlining model development, automating some deployment, and then kind of achieving this full MLOps framework. So what I've done is kind of breaking this down into like maturity levels. What do we expect to see, kind of from start to finish? What are those stages of growth? And what's the impact regarding risk? So starting out, releases are difficult. They're all manual. There's no life cycle management. There's very much silos between data scientists, data engineers, developers. There's no lineage, no tracking. We're talking manual builds and deployments. And of course, the risk is very high for a level 0. And then a level 1 is we're starting to get into more of a data ops framework where we have data pipelines in place. We're still doing manual releases, but there starts to become some collaboration between data scientists and data engineers. We're getting kind of like that pre-processing pipeline. There's still no version control for model development experiments. There could be automated builds, but that might be only on the application side and not really incorporating that ML model. And this still represents a level of high risk. Now, level 2, we're getting into more streamlined model development. It's easy to reproduce the model. Releases, they're still manual, but definite collaboration going on between data science, software development, data engineers. There's version control around model development experiments, automated model training, still manual model testing, and we begin to get into registering and thoroughly tracking those models. Once again, we're not really looking and observing how well that model is doing in the wild, so it's still characterized as a high risk. But now we enter level 3, and level 3 is definitely an upgrade in terms of the maturity. We have releases that are now semi-automated and faster. We have a robust CI/CD pipeline in place. There's a release management cycle. Code, data, and trained models are all version controlled. There might still be manual testing of models. And then we're capturing some of the model test performance and registry. And this, upgrades it to more of a moderate risk, because from this system, you have, a robust way to to test and deploy models, and you're also you're also monitoring the model's performance, so you'll have a better idea of when your model needs to be retrained. Now for level 4, for the full MLOps solution, releases are automated. There's that very robust CI/CD pipelines in place. Retraining is triggered automatically. There's automated testing of models, model registry and tracking and management. There's data drift, concept drift algorithms that are deployed, and performance metrics which monitor and collect the performance of the models. And so this is where we're getting into the category of lower risk. So now I'm going to talk about an MLOps use case, and that is thinking about MLOps for satellites. So we took part in the Hyperspace Challenge, which was put on by AFRL. It challenges companies who are not in space to brainstorm and come up with innovative solutions for the challenges that they're facing in space. And we were the winners of the Hyperspace Challenge in 2020. And what we came up with was a novel approach for leveraging neural networks for predicting fault detection. And so this is a definite use case for MLOps because this is, a really mission critical project. Our end customers, they're performing missions such as performance launch, on orbit, emergency end-of-life testing and disposal operations. They're providing warning, navigation, R&D, and surveillance, and weather to the highest ranks of the national government. And we really focused in on, this key problem that satellites are expensive. They're mission critical platforms, and they're exposed to many different, harsh environments. And they're producing, massive data sets, and there's a lot of heterogeneity between these data sets that are inherent to the underlying satellite. And so operators need a way to be able to comb through all of this data and really identify the subtle signals that can be early warning signals that alert the operators for when they need to intervene and mitigate. And we talked with a subject matter expert, Michelle Simon from AFRL, who talked about satellites, like a computer. Like we all get frustrated when our computer freezes and we have to do a manual restart. And she said like we don't want to be doing that same manual restart with satellites. So what we came up with is SPAICE. And SPAICE stands for Space Prognostic Artificial Intelligence Custodian Ecosystem. And SPAICE was really derived from David Doolin's kind of pioneering work in looking at survival analysis in oncology, where you're basically collecting patients' data and predicting the outcome or the prognosis for a patient. And when we thought about this problem for SPAICE, it was very attractive because unlike, in healthcare where maybe you're getting a blood sample, every few months or something, with satellite data, you could be getting data from, 150 million different million sensors, and that could be happening, 6 times a second. So if we think about SPAICE, we have to think about all the heterogeneity of these satellites. So we're not talking about a single, machine learning model. We're talking about, machine learning models that really have to be customized and trained for each of the individual satellites. So we can think of, like a fleet of satellites, we might have, 100 or 1,000, machine learning models. And it's collecting all this data, and then it's informing operators, it's informing commanders and engineers. And for each user, it performs, a different background and a different set of functionalities. For the operator, it's kind of running in the background. It's only, flashing those red lights when it detects a fault prediction. for the commander, you can view it as a satellite fleet mode. And then for the engineer, it provides a full attribution system, which allows the engineer to pinpoint different components or subcomponents within the telemetry data, um, such that they can really problem solve and identify um, the underlying problem. And in the event of a predicted event, the ground station might do some kind of corrective action for that satellite. Now we take into account, MLOps and just kind of how complicated it can be. So we have our model deployment with our robust CI/CD pipelines, our development environment, and then we're detecting data drift, concept drift, and we're monitoring the system and getting that feedback loops in terms of our results. And this is all fed to the MLOps system. And then a trigger occurs, and it's, the decision is made that a model needs to be retrained, and this is all automated. And then we have a challenger model that then is deployed. And then we're tracking, how well is this challenger model doing against the model that's in production. There's lots of interesting commercial opportunities for this technology, such as digital twin capabilities. And this could be for, building operation crews, predictive fleet maintenance. There's potential customers that include utility companies, advanced manufacturing. And this is a, rapidly growing market with the projections that it will be at 26 billion by 2025. And MLOps is really a team effort. It really takes a team to get an MLOps system employed. And so MLOps in practice requires getting buy-in. And this can be challenging. It can be challenging for, C-level executives who are used to software deployments. They may not understand the particular nuances associated with AI and ML. And there really has to be a strong alignment of core values for getting that buy-in for MLOps. And I'm really happy to be a part of RS21, where it's in our values that we want to use data for good. And so having, a robust MLOps system is really just part of our DNA. And we have a great cross-disciplinary team. Cameron, who's our chief technology officer, David, whose work I described as our senior data scientist, who really pioneered these neural network approaches for satellites. We have Scott Klein, who runs DevOps, and Joshua Rivera, who's our director of development. And finally, it takes real governance. From building, that MLOps team, you really want to have, a diversity of opinion and really get everybody's thoughts in there so that, you're taking into account the holistic picture. You want to establish intention from the beginning, establish responsibilities, define a RACI chart, establish the necessary goals and processes, define the appropriate metrics for monitoring change, build multiple layers of checks and balances for the MLOps pipeline, continuously educating the organization, and teaching decision makers and builders both how to mitigate risk for AI and ML. And MLOps is really a key pillar for responsible AI. And responsible AI being that we need to act with empathy, reduce or eliminate bias, provide transparency, establish accountability. And MLOps is really hitting on, the accountability and the transparency. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and I welcome you to reach out and for us to continue the conversation. Thank you so much.
That was fascinating, and I should say congratulations on winning the hyperspace challenge. That use case that you talked to is just clearly you need the MLOps capability to be able to manage that fleet of heterogeneous satellites, each with its own separate machine learning module looking for problems as they go through. Could you talk a little bit about what led to? I mean, you implied in the video that you used or reused a biomedical model to help with. Did I get that right? Sorry.
Yeah, so we leveraged kind of our expertise in oncology. So David had worked in survival analysis for oncology, and he kind of come up with a way to really personalize that, leveraging neural networks so that it would be more personal for an individual patient. And then we thought it was a really interesting application of going from healthcare, where you may only be able to collect, patient data, like, you know, once a month, whenever somebody's coming in for a checkup, and instead really have a much more data rich scenario where, you're collecting, hundreds of millions of satellite data every 6 seconds. So we actually figured like it would work much better for the situation of satellites.
I'm presuming you've deployed this at this point.
So we're in the stages. It's actually, it's quite a challenge even in getting access to the data. So we're working with our partners and working out on training and tuning these models specifically for satellite data.
Okay. Okay. Well, your choice of background makes a lot more sense. I should have asked you more about that before we got started. Um, Now, you mentioned in your presentation that I'm going to go way back to near the beginning. You mentioned that there's like 2% of companies using ML have been successfully deployed to production. Number one, I'm curious about where the data came from, but then number two, I'm wondering about, we're seeing this massive investment in machine learning. Are people really having challenges getting the return on investment that they need to?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, challenges there. It's much more common for data science to be done kind of like benchtop data science. And and I think there's challenges kind of culturally of, getting data scientists to adopt to standards and processes which can lead to more production and deployment of those models. And regarding where the data came from, this is from a book called Engineering MLOps, Rapidly Build, Test, and Manage Production Ready Machine Learning Life Cycles, by Emmanuel Raj. So a book, right out of the press release on the topic of MLOps.
I'm glad
Yeah.
you had that right to hand. That's very helpful. Because I'll be honest, I need to look into more around the ML ops. My own experience, the firm has the company I work for has a good ML ops environment, but my team doesn't, and we're not leveraging it. So I think this might help with some of our success factors. I really like that maturity model that you put together with the level 1 through 4. How much of that is your work? How much of that is something that you're leveraging from other areas?
Yeah, so I, kind of talked amongst, my team members from data engineering, from DevOps, from data science, and we all kind of did some research and some homework, and kind of came up with those kind of different metrics. And I think the one key is really that risk level, and you don't really get to see that risk level change much until you get towards the end. Um, but I think it's we got to just continuously work until we're getting that that final value and that final deliverable in terms of MLOps maturity.
Yeah, it's a shame though that it's going to have sort of a hockey stick result on the risk, because I think
Uh-huh.
that's the sell point, right?
Definitely.
I was looking at your. I'm sorry, I had a question here. Oh, the concepts of concept drift and data drift, and then you started to talk towards the end of your maturity model that those become almost an automatic check as you get towards level 4 with full ML ops. I guess I'm not really asking a great open-ended question, but I mean, did I get that right? Is that the way that that kind of falls along?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, of course, you're gonna start adopting those sooner. Like we kind of prioritized it of really starting to get like streamlining, of getting like a robust CI/CD pipeline in place. Um, um, it's a little bit challenging thinking about like what components need to be part of each section, because of course they're all very critical, right? Like having a data drift and concept drift classifiers, those are of course very important, but you have to think that we're not really necessarily at that stage of real full production, so we're kind of gradually building the systems that are getting us to that full, more of that full deployment.
I mean, it makes sense. Any maturity model is obviously going to have levels at which you're starting to introduce the concept, and then levels at which you're really fully leveraging the concept. So it sounds like I really should be looking to try and start doing that a little bit sooner. Um, the sorry, I got a ping from my message here as I'm doing this. The Okay, we talked about the hyperspace. Okay, I have to ask the question. I'm sorry, this is maybe a little bit off topic, but SPAICE, is that a backronym? Did you guys deliberately build that in as a cool acronym?
We did. Yeah, we couldn't help ourselves. We had to like somehow, insert AI in the word. So
No,
yeah.
that was well done. It really worked, and I wasn't 100% sure it was a backronym because it did fit in well. Um, Somebody said, okay. Mary D was just commenting that she loves that acronym as well. I did. I just loved it. Um, okay, so we talked a bit about the overall project, and we talked about the needs for ML ops. You talked about governance, but it felt. I mean, could you explore that a little bit more, because I'm not 100% sure I would know what to do at the first step in my organization.
Yeah. I think it starts by definitely the education piece, right? Like a lot of times you have teams and they're used to working in more siloed environments, data science kind of doing, the benchtop work, and so you have all those siloed systems. So I think it's really important to get everybody together and really talk about, when that model's in production and the challenges that model's going to face, because you really need to get buy-in from everybody to really understand, like, why are we doing this? Why do we have to build out this elaborate MLOps system? So I think, getting everybody on board with the problems is really important. And that also, requires buy-in from the CEO and other executives that aren't necessarily familiar with this stuff. So
Yeah, I know. Nigel Duffy at my organization and Roger Park have both been doing strong work within our organization to see us adopt that kind of a model, and they've got the ear of the CEO. I'm not in that position, so I'm trying to work with my leadership to make them see the value. And to be honest, the questions that we have are at that level 0 kind of question. We're just trying to see, can we solve a business problem using ML, machine learning, et cetera,
mhm,
rather than we've solved the problem and now we've built a product around it, and now we have to make that product work over the long term, which is,
mhm.
it's really interesting for me to talk with someone with 15 years experience and that background and depth there. Do you have, just tips and tricks for people like in my position? I'm just since I've got that question here.
Yeah, I just think it's important to have like open communication, like, like early on. So even if you're like at that level 0, I think it's really important to, be communicating the value, like, there's a tremendous amount of value that data science can deliver, even from a Jupyter notebook, right? And so it's really about, explaining. I think it's all about really communication. Like data scientists in general, like sometimes, we tend to just, work heads down. And I really think it's about getting out and really talking and describing the value from levels zero. And then as you start to migrate, up that ladder. And the other thing I would say is it's good to communicate, the next phase, like the next phase of work. What are the challenges we're going to face? What's the benefits? What's the value? What's the ROI that we're going to bring in? So I think that's another important point.
No, I think that's really helpful. Thank you. Have a question from the audience with question around the teams who are having differing definitions of machine learning and don't really realize that they're talking from different starting points. Have you seen that? Is that a true challenge? And if it is, what have you done to overcome it?
Sure. I think getting in there and having presentations, having lunch and learns that really teases out that topic of, what's the difference between, like artificial intelligence and machine learning, having those kind of basic conversations. And I think the other thing is not, really being open to questions and never like treating anybody like a question isn't warranted, like it's no matter what question it is, everybody should feel at ease to ask that question and to have an answer. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think the idea of lunch and learns and grassroots kind of growth around the topic makes a good starting position. They're tougher to do, obviously, with the pandemic. You kind of end up with these sorts of sessions where you're
Uh-huh.
talking to each other over camera.
Another thing we try to do is like one pagers to really get, like, what is this topic, what is NLP at a really high level, and then to drill into it, like, what is the value add that we can provide with NLP, and then what work have we done in the past that, we can kind of do case studies. But, we really try to communicate this from, project managers to, account leads to really help them, you know, um, be better at really understanding and ultimately selling our work. So.
That's really interesting. Um, you mentioned AI ops, and as a comparison, this is the things you're talking about are not AI ops. It's you used it as a negative case. Is it okay? I'll be direct. I'm not familiar with that term. So could you tell me a little bit about what AI ops is and how it's solving DevOps problems? Sorry, that's
Yeah,
like probably a
sure.
whole talk right there.
Yeah, and I have not, worked extensively, in that area, but, I think it has to do with, training models that can help streamline, different parts of, a DevOps, process. So I think that's kind of, more what it entails, but I'm definitely no expert in that. So
Okay, sorry for trying to lead you down a path you're not
yeah, no,
not
it's
ready to
okay.
go down. Okay, we're right at time. Yeah, I want to thank you for your time today. I thought it was a really interesting presentation. I loved hearing about it, and again, congratulations on the hyperspace challenge. That the approach and the problem you solved there is just really fascinating.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Okay, cool. It was awesome. Okay, so our next session will be at 2 o'clock. It's how neural networks become smarter with Paul Nelson. So looking forward to that conversation. Michelle, if you have time to take part in the networking area, answer questions people may directly approach you about, that would be great. Otherwise, and guys who are attending the session, please do take the time to fill out the evaluation so that we can hear our feedback about how the talk went and what kinds of things you want to see next year at Data Summit. So thanks, and we'll pick up again at 2. Thanks, everybody.